July 24th, Bitcoin, 4-hour chart. And one of the elements that gives us the key to this movement is the Doji that we're seeing appear on the chart. We're going to analyze it to see what the price movement forecast is for the weekend and a bit into the start of the week. In other words, for the next 5 or 6 days. We'll also look at where Bitcoin's price stands in the long term according to Wyckoff, and we'll check out the best positions or entries for intraday trading or scalping for today, July 24th, and the weekend. I'm Michael Vasquez. This is Daily Bitcoin Analysis, and after 15 years in professional trading, I can tell you that the only thing that really works to win, that is to predict the price movement correctly, to actually make money trading, is to watch what the institutions or big players are doing, since they're the ones who always manipulate the price movement, both the indicators and the price action itself. And what we do is look for the clues that these institutions, these large pools of liquidity, leave behind in the volume, which is the only element they can't manipulate. Without further ado, let's dive into today's analysis to see what the price is going to do over the weekend, as I mentioned, and looking ahead to next week. And at the end of the video, I'll show you the easiest way to win at trading if you're new, which is the July challenge. So, without further ado, let's get into the analysis. Let's bring up the price action. You know, that's the same no matter what strategy you're using. For example, my strategy, which is to look for the strong hands, that's where I've seen over time that you get the best results in trading, both in intraday scalping and for the week. That's really where things move, where you can actually build a career in trading, so to speak, and what works best is looking for those clues. What I was saying about price action, that works for any strategy because it's the framework through which an asset moves. It has its support, its resistance, and its mid-channel. In this case, on the 4-hour chart, we have 60,000 as support, 68,000 as resistance, and the mid-channel is at 64,000. If we look back a bit at the history, you can see that whenever the price approaches those areas, it either reacts by staying in that zone for a while, like we saw the last time it was around 60,000. It dropped a bit to near 68,000, but it stayed in that area for quite some time. We've seen that same reaction in the mid-channel area at 64,000, and all 3 times it's happened. On the other hand, the first 2 times it reached support and resistance, it happened very quickly. These days, we've been wondering if this high is going to be the last high before starting the move down towards 60,000. You see, the move towards 60,000 usually isn't just a single candle, but rather it can take a long time along that path. Usually when it's going down, it's a bit faster than when it's going up. They usually say that it goes up like a staircase, as you can see here, and comes down like an elevator. It's a saying in trading, and honestly, most of the time it holds true. Sometimes it also goes up faster. Here we saw that it went up a bit faster, but anyway. What we were wondering was if this was the last high, and the doji that appeared gives us a bit of a clue, and is telling us that the strength of the upward movement seems to have ended. Yesterday, we were unsure if in this area it could reach a higher high and then come back, or just come back right away. And it seems that in the end, it's leaning towards going back to the 64 area, then 60. But you already know that when it gets to the 64 area, it's going to make a big move. By a big move, I mean some ups and downs. Here, for example, last weekend, well, 2 weekends ago, it did stay in the 64 area for a long time. On the other hand, in the following days, it just broke through and came back. It spent some time at 64, broke through, and came back. That's what I mean by making a move within a range, right? At 64,000. That's what we're expecting now, to reach 64,000. That's option A at the moment, to reach 64,000 and make a move. A move means that it hits 60,000 as an option to retest the upper area, and it could even get close to that high again, but that's already the middle of the channel area. Sometimes we see wicks that bring the price close to the opposite zone from where we are. For example, here we are at 64, the move is at 64, but we saw a very aggressive candle that almost reached 60. It stopped at 61,400. Wow, we could see the same thing happen here. We're playing in this 64 zone, but we could see a candle that easily approaches the last high, because the last high was far from 68,000. It stopped at 66,800. Yeah, 60, 66,800, something like that. It's been fine-tuned in the last few times. If you notice, fine-tuning means that each time the price gets close to the area we've marked as support or resistance, it adjusts it in a certain way. In other words, it modifies it. And the last few adjustments, aside from the entry, have been downward. In other words, the last time it wasn't even at 68,000. It stopped a little over 67,000, and now it hasn't even reached 67,000. So we understand that the upper area is losing strength, and the lower area is going to be confirmed as stronger. If we were to do a VPVR now, we would see that the lower area is much, much more aggressive. All right, having seen this, what we need to do is, as always, look at the long-term area, so to speak, to always understand the chart from a larger time frame to a smaller one. That way, our entries have more substance, more security. For example, now that we know we're in the upper part, this is an accumulation phase. In my course, which I've linked in the description, I explain all the Wyckoff zones, how to react or how to make entries or strategies for each of them, how to spot those institutions, what they do in one zone and in another. But broadly speaking, what they're doing now is an accumulation zone and reaching the upper part of that channel, that is, the resistance zone. Once they reach that zone, if it doesn't break, you know that to break it, there needs to be a 4-hour volume of at least 1.5, and to see a natural movement, which is what we're waiting for in the long term. But it doesn't seem, with the strength and nuance I've mentioned to you, that on this run, on this approach to that resistance, it's the right moment to break through. Most likely, it will try to gather more strength, the institutions will try, around the 60,000 zone to scare retail investors in order to fill their coffers even more, to have much more liquidity, because you know that retail moves based on sentiment. On the other hand, the big players move based on strategy. By sentiment, I mean, for example, FOMO, which is fear of missing out, right? Which is the fear of missing out on something. So retail investors, when they see the price going up, see 3 or 4 big daily candles or even 4-hour candles, they immediately try to jump on that movement, and the big players push the price down. They'll do the opposite in the 60,000 zone. You'll start hearing that the price of Bitcoin is crashing, that it's going to hit new lows, it's going to go very low, close to 30,000 and things like that. So the big players will be able to keep filling their coffers and then, at that point, make an aggressive move up to around 80 or 90,000. But we'll see that at the earliest by the end of 2026. Let's stick to our 4-hour chart, which is our headquarters, where trading really happens. Because to make trading your profession, as I explain in my course, what you have to do is make a profit on every move, or at least, for example, go up from here, from the 60,000 zone in the last rally, so to speak. Yes, from the last 60,000 up to the 68,000 zone, which we've seen didn't quite reach it, but let's call it 68,000. There have been a lot of moves. So if you do intraday scalping or even swing trading, which is for 2-3 days or a week, you can make a profit. For example, in the upward movement, you can just take one segment. You don't have to ride the whole thing, just go from here to here. Then you can even take advantage of the pullbacks. Again, in reality, it might have moved by 5%, and with leverage and the percentage you made, you could have easily made 200 or 300%. All right, we already have the forecast set up. Like I said, this doji is fundamental because it shows us that that loss, so to speak, that loss of upward momentum, considering this is probably the last high, already aiming for 64. Very well. In the intraday or scalping on 15-minute, 30-minute time frames, as you can see, this 65,000 zone is a very important area, and there's always a reaction. Right now, we're seeing a bit of a reaction at this moment. It's normal when it reaches those support or resistance zones, which are different on the 15 or 30-minute charts compared to the ones we were looking at for the long term. You have to spot them, and if you're doing intraday or scalping, move from one to another and watch how the volume reacts, which is the most important element for institutions, how it reacts when it gets to that zone. The weekend is coming, Today's Friday. It's in the morning, 11:41. But when Friday afternoon comes, around 6 or 7 in the evening, we enter a different period for Bitcoin. That is the weekend, from Friday evening until Sunday night. During that period, Bitcoin, what we've usually seen these past weekends, is that the volume disappears, meaning there's a lot less volume, and the price settles into a significant range, like, for example, 64,000, and it stays in that range throughout the weekend, with maybe a big wick when some volume shows up. Since there's no significant volume, if suddenly a fund or an individual investor makes a big liquidity move at a given moment, the price shoots up or down. In a few hours, it'll go back to the area where it started, for example, 64,000. But if you position yourself correctly, you can also make good trades, even on the weekend. Very well. Now let's talk about the July challenge, which is the easiest way to make money, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video. What I do is make one trade every day. I started on July 1st with $500 on mex.com. At first, I was making trades of $15 or $20. Now I'm already at $30 because the account is growing a lot, and otherwise the movement is too small. What I do is always enter in the direction of the movement, I set leverage at 10, like I showed you with yesterday's trade, leverage at 10. I set the take profit at 30 in this case because the account is already at 900, over 900. Now it's at 930. When I made that trade, it was a little over 900. That trade was a little over 900. You see that I get the take profit notification from mxc.com, and it's really simple both to place the trade and to win. What I do to help you make money is I'll give away the excess, meaning from 500 to whatever it ends up at. Right now I'm at 930, so I'd give away those $430. Let's hope it's even more among all of you who sign up at mexc.com and make your first deposit. I'm Michael Vasquez, and this is Daily Bitcoin Analysis. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as I always say, this is not financial advice. I'm just sharing my experience with you after more than 15 years in professional trading. See you tomorrow. Even though it's the weekend, there are always clues to follow. You have to pay close attention to what the chart is telling us, and I don't want you to miss any of them. See ya.